Sorry, I couldn't find the link initially.
Good. Roll call, Richard Heisey. Danya Elias,
Here.
Rob Mackey here. Peter Argentine,
Here,
Elio Grodnick. Janet Aiken. Boiler. Tom Shevchuk. Here. Commissioner Flynn.
Present.
Liaison Sukol.
Here.
Liaison Avolio.
Here.
Special guest, Mr. Grella, Commissioner Grella. All right. Citizens' comments. Sandy, do you have a comment this evening or just listening?
Might have been Sandy Merrick. Yeah, she jumped on. That was Sandy, our IT.
Oh, okay.
So we are citizen comment list.
All right. Approval of October minutes. Thanks, Phil, for. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Public Works updates on grounds, facilities, trees, etc. Phil, then Rudy.
Yeah. Kind of a big thing to mention, we finished our flooring upgrades and I'll send everyone out some pictures. Pretty turned out nice over at the main park restrooms. We removed all the fixtures. Older sink was kind of at the end of its life. It looked pretty raggy in there. That's our main park. So we did a nice epoxy floor coating and with a return base up the wall. So it's almost like a waterproof shell. It'll make it a little easier for kind of quicker disinfecting, easier clean really for us. But it really spruced the place up very nicely. If we get some nice temps going on, we'll get our plumber back in there. We got new toilets, urinals, sinks, everything like that. So main park restrooms will have kind of a full quick facelift to it, as well as the restrooms down at the Dixon Middle and Seymour down there as well. We also did the concession stand area and back into the storage there just to make that whole envelope one kind of big project down there. But it came out very nicely, and baseball and softball got cleaned up for us right away in there after the end of their season. And same thing, we removed all the fixtures, although they're new, so they're going to go back in. Just makes for the application of that epoxy a lot easier. Brapperton's still, the fence is hanging in there. No one has decided that the fence shall be removed, so that was good. A little bit of germination. I'm sure we'll see the rest of it here in the spring on what took, and we'll continue with our overseeding program, aerating, fertilizing as needed. Hopefully we'll maybe can be on that late summer. We'll kind of take it as we go, but that was a high lift of soil, so we're not going to get a hard enough root zone to get high traffic on it right away. So we made that clear to all the associations and everything, not to expect just spring to have that big square footage into play for all their programs. So they're still in the mindset of not using that last little quarter for at least the spring. So we'll keep an eye on that as it goes. Other than that, pretty quiet in the parks. The contractors, we cleared all their POs for the year. They owe us leaf removal throughout all the parks. So we drive around, make sure that it's up to what we think leaf wise should be removed. So that just helps the turf get through the winter and makes for a nicer spring, less debris and stuff for our guys to go back for. So they did a pretty good job this year. Will be the last year that they're of their 3-year contract, and then next winter we'll review our specs again and go out to bid if that's the direction we're going in. So other than that, the guys have been kind of through the parks here and there, but I'm sure you know the bulk of their time was in leaf and everything like that these last 2 months.
Not a whole lot to report on an administrative level. We're going to start working. We've had a couple of conversations internally on implementing what we can implement in-house of the Parks Master Plan. So starting to look at planning that, what we'll have to budget for, what we'll have to outsource, just try to organize those things to try to get it done in less than 10 years this time versus the last time. So really just starting to look at that. And this time of the year, we're just wrapping up end of year things with leaf collection and so forth, like Phil said, and he covered most of the other things that have been done in the parks over the last month or so.
Will you bring kind of that, as you start kind of laying out kind of the administrative kind of thoughts around the Parks Master Plan?
Mhm.
Will you bring that to this board? You know, kind of as the next layer of saying, okay, here's what the plan says, here's how we kind of propose implementing over the next few years, this is kind of our strategy.
It will be up to the board, obviously, but yeah, it will start with the mixture of the Parks and Sports Board when that transitions in April. And then from there to the commission. So, but right now, we just want to break it down into chunks on what we need funding for, bigger
Right.
item, you know, those type of things. And there's probably a lot of things that we can knock out ourselves.
Right.
With our own staff, and then we'll just program that time into our staff time so that we're, you know, kind of have that in the back of our mind, hey, we need to spend a week doing this or that or whatnot, so. So yeah, that's kind of the general game plan for right now on how we're gonna approach it and attack it.
This is a tree question, and I don't think it's about having a thing, but it's something that happens here, so I want to be aware. Yellow dots at the bases of trees.
Duquesne Light,
Okay.
it's just a survey. They hired a planning company, I think out of Ohio. They have a planner or a couple planners that are going around and looking at the trees. And putting marks on trees that they feel need to be reviewed afterwards. It means nothing. We have to authorize or approve any sort of removals or anything of that nature. I'm getting constant calls. I told them it'd be easier if they just mark the trees they don't want to do anything to, because it seems like they're marking every tree along the street. So,
Private property too.
Pardon
I think private property in the. right
it could be
of way as well.
rear easements as well, but, our focus has been, and the calls that I've received primarily have been with the street trees along the street, so. But they're not gonna do, you know, I have to think that their goal is probably to try to remove as many trees as they can, because then they're removing future maintenance. And, you know, but they're marking trees on both sides of the road. I talked to, Mr. Work on Country Club this morning, down on the 800 block of Country Club. And he's opposite of his home is opposite of the utility lines. And they marked a big oak tree on his side just because there's some branches going across the street, you know, so. I mean, is it within the proximity of their trim zone? It probably is, but, you know, we're certainly not gonna authorize the removal of one of those trees just because it, you know, may or may not cause a problem in the future. Now, if there's structural issues and we could benefit from it because it would have to be removed in the next couple of years, then we're gonna take advantage of that because it's gonna be done on Duquesne Light's dime, and we wouldn't have to hire someone or use our resources to do that. So if it's something that would benefit us financially or from a planning standpoint that we want to remove something or have something removed, then we're definitely going to work with them on that.
Will you get a report in advance so that you can?
Not a complete report. They typically just, they'll follow up with us on individual trees that they feel that they would like to remove, or they may point something out that we weren't aware of. And then, you know, we look at it and structurally it makes sense to do that. But that's typically the only time we'll remove a tree is if it's structurally unsound, has a disease or some other insect or something that they can't recover from. You know, we try to not remove as many trees as we can, if that makes sense. That's ultimately, we don't want to remove trees.
Is this a continuation of the work that they've been doing in Sunset Hills?
Yes and no. That was capital work that was in the rear easements, primarily along the transmission lines. This is all distribution. So it's front street work. I mean, there's some distribution that's in the back too, in my transmission lines, but the work that they're doing in Sunset Hills as well as over in, Cedarhurst, down along the main park, that's all transmission lines, the big towers, with real high voltage lines that are going through it. This is separate work. This is planning for maintenance pruning for a 3 to 5 year period.
Thank you. Peter, any questions on maintenance updates or anything for Rudy or Phil on that agenda item?
I think he's muted again.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, no, thank you.
Great, thanks, guys. Commissioner Flynn, commission update.
Just to say that we are doing reorganization tonight. So, you know, that is happening at 8, so we will, you know, Commissioner Grell and I will be skipping out here in, I don't know, 45 minutes. And Commissioner Grella is going to be taking over this board as part of our effort, you know, this transition. we are aligning the current boards and the new boards and positioning commissioners so that they are there to facilitate the transition. So I am taking the mobility, so that's traffic and parking. Commissioner Grella obviously has parks and sports, which are going to Parks and Rec. So that's kind of everything that's mainly on the agenda right now. Don't forget though, the comp plan, I think it's still out there. I think comments are still always welcome. So if you haven't made any, please get them in. And comments are welcome on the 9th. Anything else?
No, that's it. Yeah, pretty much.
We, for your information, we had about 8 pages of comments to the first draft of the comp plan relative
Yes.
to parks, and I believe several of the suggestions were heard. The subsequent draft reflected that some of our feedback was incorporated.
I did, we had a copy of all the notes had been submitted, I want to say like up until the holiday time. I submitted my pages of notes like maybe 2-3 days ago. But I did read through all the notes submitted by all the different boards and residents and the comments that were made, read into the record too, and public meetings. So, yeah, thank you. More comments, the better.
Thank you, Commissioner Quinn. Let's move on to park visits. So every year, board members visit parks, check things out. One for awareness, 2 safety items, which may or may not have already been reported, and just ideas and familiarity with what could be potentially improved in parks. So we are a little jammed up here because we have double the number. So we can go through this pretty quickly. Peter, please call out if you have comments to any of these.
Hey, Rob, actually, I was just wondering if the commissioners are leaving in 45 minutes, whether we should move up in the agenda to discuss the main park master plan, since I think that would come after they're gone.
So, so the main park with tennis center happens to be the first park visit, but to your point, main park master plan, lower in the agenda. Maybe we should talk about board transition as well. Cause that is, important to the commissioners.
And if the commissioners have other things that they'd like us to, from that second list, to prioritize while they're there.
If you look at that 750 category, I was gonna propose closing some of these because I don't think we have enough runway to get a lot done on them, or nothing's happening, or it's steady state. But I'll just jump down to that 750 category and say, for communications and signage, I propose we close this item from old business. I think it's pretty well on its way now.
We have funding in this year's budget for that $20,000.
Yeah, we did site visits with key members, baseball, softball. We invited whoever could make it. I'm currently working on the RFP. That'll go back to Colano. Just for a quick comment, they do this every day, so they can see if I missed something big that could impact us down the road. But from there, gonna get a mock on a corrugated election sign type stuff, just to make sure we're good on the sizing. Print one of each out, kind of take it around real quick, double check before we go spend, significant dollars on this. So that's still en route. It's in RFP stage if you're looking for where we're at there. That'll be significantly moving this month.
Peter, are you okay with closing this out of old business?
Yeah, I think, as you say, there's been a lot of progress and there's funding. I noted that signage was mentioned also during the Parks Master Plan discussion, so and there's a committee formed that if Phil needs to check with, it seems like there's nothing really to report But it's great that we're finally getting some signage. Phil, there was one thing I did want to bring up, is on the main color on the signs, if it, I couldn't recall if the lettering is the same as what's on the Bird Park sign at the corner of Washington Road and Beedling, but I, driving by that a lot, the tone of gold on there really doesn't read very well, depending on the light, which is often when I'm driving by, it just seems like unless you're right at the right angle, can you read it? So I would just double check on whatever Colino recommended, that it is a prominent color
Okay.
rather than just matching that.
Got it. I have a couple notes from you on some color palette suggestions as well as font stuff, so I'll add that to there.
Okay, thanks. Good to close, Rob.
Thanks. Danya, Tom, any final comments on that? Forestry and invasives, meeting with Tim Nuttall, members of the Conservancy, members of the board, Phil. I thought it was a great 30-minute rundown of what he's done so far. Aerial photography, the mapping, it's all excellent. And having him talk through it, it's worth, commissioners, your time. We can send you the link to that. It's really, really excellent. I made the point during it, I'll make it again. The aerial photography and the mapping explains very well how we got to where we are. So I think just that from an education standpoint will inform future decision-making about how we manage the forests and the invasives.
That's in your drop folder for Parks Board. That video is in there if you need to pull it back. If you need to know how to get to it, just send me an email, I'll get it to you.
Teams.
On the one thing for me, my whole goal of this is, and it's always, I feel like I'm always saying this, I want to understand our capacity need to manage invasives. You could draw me a picture and say, oh, these are the invasives. That doesn't really tell me anything. It's like, what do we need to, what's the kind of capital commitment up front, and then what's the ongoing, cost that we can anticipate? I mean, what's this delta? That's what do we feel like we got that out of this?
Well, not quite. Next phase is the suggested implementation or strategy phase of like,
Okay.
this was mainly, this is what you got, this is where you are.
An evaluation of existing conditions and how we got there.
Next report is, this is what you should be doing, and techniques, and I think,
Plants, plant material replacements.
and then as far as how much that costs you to implement or us to implement, it's how much acreage we're taking on at any one time, considering the fact that once you do it, you have to go back the next year and the next year and the next year. Like descending level of intensity per acre, but it doesn't go away after the first try. So one of the questions I think is worth asking after watching the video or the discussion with Tim is a serious conversation about what we want a particular acreage to look like eventually. We shouldn't, I don't think, assume that we just want it all to look like Western Bird Park. Maybe we do, but I don't think we've asked that question before. Because the difference between Eastern Bird Park and Western Bird Park is 60 years. So what's that ground gonna be for the community for the next 50 years? Is it gonna be usable? Is it gonna be a recreation space? What's it gonna be? Doesn't mean you can't move towards the eventual climax hardwood forest, but in the meantime, what value is the community gonna get out of it?
No,
Oh, I was just gonna say, to your point, Commissioner Flynn, was that, two of the things we asked for, one is we asked for prioritization of, where to go first or hit, and he did say it would be likely, it wouldn't be like hit them all right now. And we also asked for generalization of some of the recommendations, but also a high and low, like, if we can only afford this much, what are the recommendations? But if sky's the limit, what would the recommendations be? So, to aid in the, planning and budgeting process and decision-making process.
Got it. Yeah, no, again, right, for me, guys, it's like, yeah, I think it's important, right, that we have all the details or right, the plans and the strategies but at some point, it really boils down to how much does it cost? And what do we plan for it and how does staff think about this 10-year plan, right? And whatever it's gonna need to bring to the commission every year for however long, right? What is this capacity that we need to build in the system? Otherwise, it's a one-off and it gets lost. And that's the last thing we want, right? We want this to get embedded. So how do we squeeze that out of the consultant as best we can to get that line of sight on the financial commitments that we're trying to make? Because that's ultimately the decision point.
And how do we break it down? I mean,
Right.
in-house labor, contractual, or volunteers? I mean, because that's the combination that we're using right now
Right.
and to what extent, to what percentages too. And that's gonna determine the cost.
Long list of things I should know that I've forgotten recently. Oikos is going to prepare a final written report with the preliminary recommendations, et cetera, that Peter just mentioned. And
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question, like the
And
timeline for that is.
April, May. Yeah, April, May, and there'll be a presentation to the commission as well at a discussion session. That's
Warn them, I'm going to hammer them on costs. Make sure they know.
okay.
All right. And then the second thing I forgot, I think the proposed funding for the follow-up, more implementation or more detailed study didn't make the cut. There was something that was on the Parks Advisory Board's.
Right, it was on a list of our priorities. I think it was 2 or 3.
Yeah,
Funding for it. Mindy asked point blank, what do you need? We don't know. That's the challenge. We could say, well, yeah, give us $50,000, but unless we know exactly what we're doing with it, other than going through areas we've already gone through and cut and spray and, it wasn't, I didn't feel that we had the necessary information to make that type of request at that time. So.
well, hopefully based on the Oikos report, when it comes out in the spring, the reconfigured board and the commissioners and Public Works, et cetera, can start planning to consider a line item, budget item for 25, maybe to get more detailed design and cost estimation and, et cetera, to get it to the point where it's implementable.
Right.
And its funding allows.
That's actually one of the, it's topic for later, but the board transition, just based on the way the membership's working out from existing to, and terms expiring, it looks like it will be, there will be a lot of sports representation on the future board. So one of the board transition questions is, and I know we vocalized this via email, is how do we ensure the continuity with passive park related stuff into the future board? I noticed in the description of the Parks Board on the website, all the descriptions are now up for the new boards are up on the website, and towards the bottom, it's something referred to as an ex officio representation, or basically it's a non-voting participation. So perhaps that's something related, could be something for invasives to keep some continuity there, depending on how the composition of the future board works out.
So, yeah, so that was one of the structural shifts that I was really focused on when we did this, was making sure that there is kind of consistency in terms of governance frameworks around each board. One is making sure that each board has an advisory, associate membership kind of function. Because there are more stakeholders than just board members, right? Board members get to vote on agenda items, but that doesn't mean we don't need other people at the table, right? And I think I've seen that consistently across boards. And with the transition, I think that's gonna be really important. To your point about, the number, and ultimately, I think this would probably be in Commissioner Grella's seat to facilitate, but if we are concerned that there are going to be potentially too many sports and not enough, parks, again, that's, ultimately, that the transition plans that have been articulated and socialized are just an advisory kind of framework. There is no requirement. Commission can ultimately appoint whomever they feel is appropriate, so long as we're working within the rules that we have established over the years, mainly that, people can't have more than 2 terms, and that type of thing. But beyond that, right, commission has flexibility to appoint. So if there are particular areas where you're concerned, where you want to make sure that there is a certain skill set, just raise it. I think it's worth making sure that we are having those conversations going into the transition, which is sooner rather than later.
Peter, while we're on that topic, any questions or comments? Noticed we have Richard Heisey now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I've had some connectivity issues. But I do have a quick comment. As far as the budgets, et cetera, there's guidelines out there. Penn State has guidelines, et cetera, about how you approach it. Cost estimates, that's pretty well known. There's firms who do that. And I think the one thing, for example, the cost of maintaining a wooded area that's in control is significantly less than the cost to mow grass. And so, but you do have to spend something. I think part of the challenge has been over the last 50 years, there's really been no spending at all. So you kind of got years to catch up on. But once a wooded area is under control, I think the cost to maintain it is about a quarter of that of mowing grass. So it's not a huge lift. It's just, you got to approach it just as you would a grassed area in Main Park. If it's wooded, it needs some maintenance, and we've just never done any. So somehow you need to just have a land management plan that just takes that into account and have a schedule. But it shouldn't be there may be some remediation initially, but long term it shouldn't be a huge expense once it's in control.
We had conversations about forestry and management, which I think is now, we had money in the budget for some sort of plan, did we not? Thought we did. Yeah. So, I mean, presumably that would all be included in that.
Right, that's one of the deliverables that was included in the RFP requirements, so, yeah. So there will be costs and pricing and that, but it needs to be established, so you need to establish a force before you can maintain it. And the guidance that we need from the professor that's doing the study is, what do we plant and where do we plant it, how thick do we plant it? So really, that's what we're looking for from him, to not only establish that, but to discourage or eliminate the possibility from invasives reestablishing in the understory. That's the way I see it, at least, anyway.
And typically, one other comment, when restoration is needed, typically, if you look at what's done, is you turn over a space to a contractor for 5 years. And to Rob's point, you specify what's the end condition you want them to turn it back over to you. And you'll take a parcel, whatever it is, and you'll say, here, contractor, you start maintaining it over the next 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, when you turn it back to us, we want it in condition XYZ. And that's typically how you see, at least what I've seen as examples, what people do. I think that's what the state of Pennsylvania does typically also when they do restoration, is they'll give the contractor 5 years. Versus saying, hey, come in and do it all in one season. They'll say, do a plan and implement that over the next 5 years.
Who typically manages that? Is that the DEP or is it forestry? Pennsylvania Forest Service or?
Yeah, it's to be out of the Forest Service. I think, yeah, well, Rob has that acquaintance that does that professionally. He'd probably have a better understanding, but the one really large example I found, outside of St. Louis where they were tackling, 40, 50,000 acres. They had a great example of how to approach it. They picked their first wave, their second wave. They went out to, they specified, some of it they wanted to keep prairie, some of it they wanted wooded, some of it was more, just replanted, but don't worry about natives, just get it planted nicely. And then they would turn over those spaces to contractors. And then the contractors would implement a program, and they probably had 10, 12 different contractors working on different parcels.
Yeah, it almost sounds to me, and I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but yeah, we have a very robust road program, right? That is decades kind of in the making. I feel like this almost needs like 100-year plan, right? To a certain extent.
Very similar in that when you talk about roads, you guys talk about the condition and whether it needs a total rebuild or a scrape and, repay. It's very similar. And it has a life.
I would say the projects, the nonprofit land I've been involved with and maintaining, we would typically have a 20 to 25-year plan.
Also,
And-
she said that
Peter?
You won't mute.
sorry about that little side discussion going on.
So that what you do is like what you'd zone. So the projects I've been involved in, some of them are upwards of 3,000 acres. You zone off the spaces, you do designate into zones, and then each zone has a 25-year plan, 20 to 25-year plan with a forester. And in those cases, we were doing sustainable harvesting too. We were actually looking to get some revenue. And most of the properties I'm involved with, the sustainable forestry more than covered the maintenance of the invasives in the property. There was actually, they'd run a surplus. So we typically would target generating about $50 to $100 per acre per year on average net. So they would actually, but that's where we were actually doing some planned planting and logging. And you would go through and you might take out trees every 7 to 10 years in a given parcel. But that's doing sustainable forestry type practices. But that for a camp where you're running a large nonprofit camp, you don't want the maintenance to, you're already struggling budget wise. So that's a way to do the maintenance without, and maintain the invasives and maintain it in a natural state. And the view is the trees get at a certain age anyway, they're just going to rot or they become falling hazards. So you want to remove them at the right point of their life, just for safety purposes anyway, since they're youth camps or other camps.
Right. So we'll see what Tim has to say in the next part of the process. Release, thank you.
But I think you'd be surprised with the right forestry technicians who have training and the right equipment, you'd be surprised what they can do. It's not very, you don't see it it's not very common in this area of Pennsylvania, but a good forestry crew can, like, going through and removing invasive brush. The biggest issue is removing the brush. It's not killing it. It's if you want to cut and treat and then remove the brush, removing brush probably triples the cost.
We'll
Or
see
quadruples.
what Tim has to say. We'll leave this item open for the next meeting. Park design guidelines and trail restoration. This was a lofty, very broad topic. And I think we got as far as a first cut table of contents. And the next step on that is to have the board review the table of contents. It's with Kelly, unless Tanya or Peter, you have additional input on it.
No, we shared, we looked at it, but we haven't had a chance to get together and review and make the final presentation to the board.
If we can do that in February, that'd be great. And if nothing else, we put it in the folder as an artifact for the next board to start from.
One of the one of the things, and excuse me for the prior interruption, I have a son in the ER right now. But one of the things, in the one meeting that, Commissioner Ranney attended, and I think there was a discussion of, which kind of would make the effort somewhat moot, that she felt that, an actual, plan would be needed, that someone for trails and that level of design, you really need, it's not a volunteer type of thing. There's some initial guidelines that we can write up, but that for a targeted, bespoke plan, I guess that, that's something that should be put out there. That was my kind of recollection of it. And,
And I think for Mount Lebanon, the ideal is to reference a best practice. So there is a trail building guideline for the state or for the US Forest Service. Somebody's got it. We don't need to recreate it.
Actually, to that point, I actually had a conversation with a gentleman from Pashick. Randomly had this conversation. He said, "Oh, I actually wrote the guidelines for the state." He said, "I have the book. I'll give it to you." He actually gave it to Ian, and Ian was gonna give it to me. I said, "No, Ian, just hold it. You're the one who needs it, not me." So we actually have a copy of the state approved trail design guidelines.
And I think this is an example of where if we are going for something that is, let's call it accredited, or able to be signed off on as officially meeting all the specs because it's attached to a grant or some other type of funding from the state or some other body, makes total sense to hit it, to the letter. But if it's not that, if it's coming out of our own pocket and we have to make compromises here and there, and doing really well is better than, seeking perfect and not doing it at all, we can use these best practice guidelines to make our work more efficient and get a better
get that
product.
woman's name, Elizabeth, and you can go right up to her and say, "Excuse me, I'd like your name."
Like for the stream restoration stuff, we do it under a certain type of permit. If we were doing it under a different permit, we would have to hit other specifications precisely. Just because we don't have to do it under that permit doesn't mean we shouldn't use the guidelines for the more stringent permit to get a better outcome when we write our RFP. The same with the trail stuff. Like, we might not hit check every single box. Now, if we're getting grant funding, maybe we need to, but if we're not, maybe we're getting really close and getting a really, really good outcome, and we don't have to have a volunteer board try to come up with the standards.
I would imagine on the look that the DCNR or whatever guidance is probably available online. All of us do. People that don't.
And that's why this
Track
is,
it down and download it, so we have a PDF of it.
this table, this line item is a table of contents. It's basically an outline. It's not like guys are gonna write it from scratch. And
We looked at multiple examples, but never, and that's where we populated the table of contents, but it just never took off from there.
so we'll leave it open for February. Next one, sorry. Okay, Main Park Master Plan. This ties us back to our park visits. It was November 14th. Commission got a good lengthy presentation on ideas for Main Park. Has anything happened with that since that meeting?
It is back to the consultant.
Let me share my screen, actually. So they gave a bunch of different ideas for Main Park, slotting in different features, putting in different parking areas, The discussion is very good. A lot of recognition of the trade-offs and costs and I think most importantly, if you know anyone that lives near Main Park, maybe it'll let them know and send them this link so they're not surprised later. What's the next step? What's the next step here? It's back with the consultants.
Yeah, it is back with them and, well, I don't know, you probably heard my comments. I gave my comments to Ian afterward. I said, what's with all the parking? We only have so much green space already. So that was my take on it. And I told Ian that, and he has reconfirmed that he has told the consultant that as well. So hopefully they're going back and, taking their next pass at it. This was just an update on the work that they had done. It wasn't a final recommendation by any means.
Okay.
But yes, to your point, I actually did live right by where that easement is off of Park Ridge, and that would have been an interesting conversation in the neighborhood.
Be a lead balloon or a lead frisbee.
Yeah. So yes, no, I mean, the interesting concepts, and I think that there were some interesting concepts there,
Yeah.
but I was frankly shocked at the amount of parking, which kind of put me off the whole presentation which was kind of frustrating because there was good things in there that deserved more recognition than I gave them.
Just a couple comments. Bike racks, sidewalks, connectivity, to encourage people to travel by other means. It's great. It's just, there's a practical reality of that too, depending on the age of your age of yourself, age of your kids, that kind of thing. One thing that I thought was odd was the Morgan Drive realignment. Do we have a problem with people driving up the sidewalk? I mean, is that a thing?
Going up to the rec center there?
Yeah, has that happened? Does that happen?
I'm really not aware of it. I mean, you'd probably have to ask the recreation folks, that's the rear entrance to
Like
the,
some rubber, flexible bollards or something that's all.
well, we put barricades up there, so.
I just have never, I've been doing that since I was 16 and I've never been tempted to drive up that. It's clearly sidewalk style pavement.
Right.
Yeah.
Or concrete.
People do drive up there to unload stuff if you're having events in the community center, but that's like
Okay.
temporary. You drive up, you drop off, you drive back, park. So I've
Yeah,
never seen anybody actually using it too.
that was an odd one. And then the addition of you cut into the green space. There's so little green space down there to begin with. It provides a nice buffer for the green space that is a nice buffer for people watching softball or baseball. You don't feel like you're sitting on the road when you're on that third base line of that
Right.
field.
Dixon, yeah.
And the idea of putting a sign in an island, it just seems like another visual obstruction that's a danger to pedestrians. I just thought that was a really unnecessary consumption of space, but just a thought.
One of the observations that was made, speaking of the active transportation comment, was, and Ian made this, was, if you look at how people get to Main Park for 4th of July, people are already walking and finding ways to access Main Park. So do we really need to be thinking about more parking, or do we need to be thinking about other types of kind of access and modes of transportation that would make that even easier? Because people are doing it now, which I thought was a completely valid point.
Well, I think maybe Ann said it, the quality of the pathways is one opportunity for improvement. When you factor in the school district too, that ascent up above the south parking lot, that's a hairy walk on the best day. But it's because costs money to fix the asphalt. Right. It's doable, but yes, that's a good point. People are finding their way to the park. Fourth of July is a good example. Pickleball courts. I'm really interested in this. Anytime you go over to Metacroft, it's packed. It's all the rage. I'm interested to see the long-term, arc of the popularity of the sport. I would encourage us not to over commit because people are gonna get pickle elbow and pickle knee and everything else, just like they did from tennis and racquetball, every other sport. It's just, there's gonna be a trajectory, some trajectory of this. It's not gonna be up forever.
Looks like
Oh,
you have
yeah,
a
I've got a
couple
couple
great
of
stands.
stands raised there.
Okay.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, yeah, I had a couple of comments on it as well. And on that last note about pickleball, several orthopedists have told me that it's the number one thing that they see in ERs are pickleball injuries, orthopedic injuries.
Fun fact, pickleball.
But I think my main comment, I thought the discussion that the commissioners brought up, and they weren't all in agreement, but I thought it was a very good discussion. And I think my biggest shock with the whole thing was that and maybe again, it's at the stage, although the next stage, I think they're focusing on the rec department building and tennis courts, I think, or it's another facility focus. I guess I was expecting a little bit more on design, and it all seemed to be focused on, if you throw aside parking, which was a large focus, facilities, increasing facilities left and right, including the disc golf, which, I question the usage of. I know it's used out at Shenley and South Park, but I think, I was hoping for someone to look at the park. I mean, I think one of the things it suffered from is a hodgepodge adding of facilities without kind of a strong master design. And I think that wooded area actually is a really nice component of it. To me, it's kind of like if you were to look at Central Park and just think that you have to build facilities everywhere in Central Park when a lot of people just want to have a refuge a little bit. And so it's a nice compliment that we have the green space. People watch fireworks up there on July 4th. They picnic up there. It could be more accessible. It's a steep hillside. But yeah, and then along the same lines, just no, there was one brief mention about bicycles, but I was asking for a bike rack at my high school in 1973. So you'd think putting in, bike racks and things, and I know we need more bike pathways, and that's all has to be mixed together. But again, this isn't really looking at that. And then the other thing, I guess in terms of that one design they had, it's removing the bocce courts, which there was a lot of talk about accessibility, and that's a sport that a lot of elderly people can play. It's not a high impact sport. So, and you don't need a lot of equipment, and it's something you can just walk right up to and play. And so I'd hate to see that go. But again, just an overall picture, I would have liked a stronger focus on aesthetic design. Sometimes I think not only with this plan, but with the comp plan and the parks plan, there might need to be a more defined charge at the beginning, because even like the comp plan started getting into territory that had already been done with the parks master plan, and it seems to be all over the place, quite honestly, at times. So it just seemed like this needed more direction from the outset on where they were going.
Thanks, Peter. Richard?
Yeah, I just the comment I've had in the past about since the high school tennis courts have been rebuilt, I've heard comments. I know Rob, your wife's a tennis player. I've heard, but from neighbors who also play tennis, that the usage at the tennis center has changed. And have they done any kind of analytical work on the tennis center itself and how it's being used, and could it or should it be relayed out in some way? Because I'm not, my impression is that there are parts of that complex that don't get much usage. And are we prior to back to the overall master plan, are we prioritizing the type of facilities that are going to maximize the space, versus saying, okay, what's there is there, and we can only impact, we can't remove anything, we can only add. Or we can't rearrange anything.
I think calling it a racket center or paddle sports center, expanding it to include more pickleball is probably the right thing to do, but it's a demand problem, and it's a demand problem because we don't have the organization to develop youth tennis, and we don't have the outreach as much as we could, I think, for adult tennis.
So to that end, but I'm sure you all are aware, right? The Indoor Tennis Association manages the courts part of the year. And then the municipality manages the courts the other part of the year. And then there's the platform tennis folks who manage their piece all year long. The relationship between municipality and indoor tennis is being revisited. We have gone out to RFP for call it a racket center management organization. That RFP is out now, with the goal of going to somebody full-time, potentially, whether it's hiring internal to the municipality or it's hiring a firm to manage the entire center top to bottom year round, right? But it's because traditionally we've had this challenge of we manage certain parts of the facility, certain parts of the year. They manage certain things. They have to staff them certain times. And there's been this bifurcation of kind of responsibility. So they came to us. We had a big conversation. We've got, the U.S. Tennis Association, got their consultants or their folks to help us develop the RFP. Because I think we all recognize that there is, we want this to be an asset that is truly valued and reinvested in and getting heavy use. And what that distribution is, again, I don't know. I'm not a tennis player and I'm not yet a pickleball player. So, to a certain extent, I have to trust that, that there are folks who are going to maximize the value to the community. But we need to get a standardized kind of organizational framework, established.
That's great news, because as Richard said, my wife plays tennis, so she's in the indoor association all winter long, and she does clinics throughout the summer. But the way that's all organized and what happens when a coach is not available, or it's had some opportunities. And then, but from a youth standpoint, carpooling to St. Clair with other Mount Lebanon families for youth tennis, seems odd.
Right.
But if I guess my point is, if you looked at person recreation hours per acre, or you put 30 6-year-olds on a small soccer field, you're getting a large volume of recreation hours per acre, where what's the recreation density of the various tennis courts? And if you're looking at, say, pickleball courts might have a much higher use, beneficial use per man of people hours of recreation per acre per year. I don't know how you measure it.
I think you're right on with the need for the data. It's as though we need, drones in the sky all the time, or monitors on the light poles to count bodies. But I mean,
I assume people have to sign up for courts, right? There should be some.
well,
sort of record.
that's exactly it. but anecdotally, the turf fields was a middle field. Middle and Seymour, I mean, they've got to be the most used assets in town.
I would guess the playground at May Park is. That would be my guess. If you get, person recreation hours per acre, my guess would be the main park playground.
It's an interesting question, right? Just to kind of step back and ask these types of questions, because ultimately, right, where we're investing, it's important to understand this dynamic. Again, to Peter's point, right, we want green space, but that is low density recreation by its nature. So how do you understand this kind of dynamic, and then again, build that capacity to sustain these types of programming and recognize that, again, yeah, we could put in 20 pickleball courts, but in 10 years, people might have all gone back to tennis. Right?
Well, if I could add, it's not just about green space. It's also, I was thinking in terms of this discussion, even that it's really about, what are parks for? And it seems like from this plan, it's largely focused on this is a recreational park. And I don't think it is just a recreational park. We call it Main Park, and it's a gathering place that we use for, again, July 4th and for other events. And someone mentioned, sitting on the hillside to watch the ball games. Those are things that bring the community together. And so that's part of that design that needs to be brought in. Like, I'm not against putting things up into that wooded area, but they could be more, they don't all have to be kind of sports related. They can be, it could be, again, a pavilion. I know some people have talked about an amphitheater for outdoor presentations and things like that. But, even the space down on Cedar, that was another potential parking area. That's an area where I've seen over the years, kids playing pickup games of football. It's not organized football, and that's what's great about it. So it's a green space that they can use. If there was a gathering place, like a large, I don't know if a fountain's too maintenance intensive, but something that was designed to bring the community together as a place where people gather, which in essence is what that the playground area is. Parents get together there and talk and meet, and that's a big part of it, is the socializing. So again, if it can be looked at as a park for people rather than just a park for sports recreation, and they both can go together, but don't exclude one.
I think that's what's great about this board's kind of smashing together, especially this one in particular, coming together with sports, because so many of our parks are sports related. It's just one of the few areas we have for that kind of activity. So I think this board will be the board that weighs in on the mix between those two things.
I believe back in, the old master plan, the 2003 master plan, there was an effort to designate different parks with different primary purposes. Doesn't mean they couldn't have a secondary. And, that the land management should emphasize that priority. So there was an effort, each park was gone through and said, given a designation and a primary purpose. And so there probably isn't a need to reinvent that wheel, but to Peter's point, how do you design around that concept versus, what's been done, say at Main Park, is kind of incrementalism, not around a master plan, and we're really land constrained. And so I think for the last 20 years, there's been attempts to buy more land, do more things, everything anybody could think of. And and there's no parcels left. I mean, there were a couple in the last 5 years, we passed on them. And as a city, so you've got to really step back and say, okay, this is what the land I have. And forget if I were going to green slate it, if I was just going to be willing to look, what do I need to do that's right for the next 100 years? You need to question some of the existing facilities, and it may be that they're not the right thing for that land use, given there is no more land.
Yeah, I think, we do these comp plans, they're good 2 years at least in the making, probably some additional staff time on top of that early on. And in a 10-year period of time, we go through multiple iterations of commissions that are responsible for kind of divvying up the money in a much more practical fashion. And I think part of what you said, Richard, is, despite whatever the comprehensive plan is or may be, we end up making these practical decisions based on need, and demand, and sometimes the squeaky wheels. Enough people come and say, hey, we want pickleball, we try to figure out how to put pickleball somewhere. It's not the perfect solution, but it's often what happens. And then, mix that with whatever budgetary restrictions we have at a given period of time. I think these commissions have been pretty good with an eye toward the future and planning and things like that, but we're always gonna run into
I
those
guess my
issues.
point is, and then if the needs evolve, like, again, what don't we need? If we need pickleball now, what don't we need anymore? And, on the whole discussion around we should have a rec center, I mean, the community made a choice years ago to have a hockey rink and an ice rink. Well, that's a great thing. It's a great facility. We use it, but we made a choice to have an ice facility instead of the traditional community gymnasium. And now people are regretting that decision and wanting, well, we want both. Well, we may not be able to afford both.
Right.
And so if you really want a rec center and we say now, well, the ice rink isn't the right thing for us anymore, then tear the ice rink down.
Yeah, I mean, those are always, it's not about right or wrong, it's about
So
what's
yeah,
right
it's
right
which is
now.
the best use for the land, and maybe you can't have both. We just don't have the space. So then you got to start making tough decisions about what are the right facilities. And at the time, the ice rink, I think the ice rink is a good thing. But if you're saying, well, we need to have a recreation center, and that's really what the community needs, versus a special purpose facility in the form of an ice rink, we need to go back and have a general purpose facility or a special purpose facility in the form of a tennis complex. Those special purpose sports facilities really the right thing for the community in the year 2030? And you've got to start maybe challenging some of those things and say, what is the right set of facilities for 2030 and 2050? And maybe some of these specialty complexes for ice rinks, tennis complexes we can't have them all.
Yeah,
Not
again,
that
I
it's
think.
any of
I
those
mean,
facilities, but it's just a tough choice and analysis one has to do. You can't just throw 900 parking spaces into Main Park.
Yeah, personally, I think these also aren't completely academic exercises. I mean, when we looked at parking, when we installed the parking ordinance, the average number of cars per family were like 0.8. And now it's like 2.4. So there's a real change and a difference culturally how we perceive parking and the practical realities of parking or lack thereof. I think when we look at things like parks and recreation, culture changes and needs shift. And we personally look to boards like this to say, these are the best practices where we are right now, or where we think they'll be in 5 years or 10 years. And we have to take that information and put it to practical use. Again, it's never going to be perfect. It's just, how good of a job can we do for the time we're here? Try to make it work.
So what's next in the timeline for Main Park in terms of both the park aspect and then the rec center aspect of it?
They were supposed to, when we looked at all those park options, the commission was basically unanimous that we didn't like a single one.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that schedule is.
Okay. So we're gonna move on. Thank you. That was a good discussion. While commissioners are still here for a couple minutes, I want to jump down to slope along Cedar across from the tennis center. So on a map, this shows up as part of Main Park. It's 3 acres roughly. Got some pictures here. There are a few desirable trees, but otherwise it's pretty thick with invasive species and just general brush, pretty hard to traverse. Although since all the leaves have come down, but notice there is I think a stand of staghorn sumac in the slope.
Really?
It's a native plant. I confuse it with tree of heaven. It's got a very similar leaf, but in the winter it has a red, like
Okay.
seed head sticking up. It's roughly in the middle. But this is on our agenda for a couple reasons. One, I don't like it. And two, it was mentioned in the comprehensive plan as an opportunity. So basically, Peter, chime in here, but I just want to open this up for a conversation for a few minutes of this area.
Well, yeah, this is something I've had an eye on for a long time as well. Again, I've mentioned in previous meetings that Cedar Boulevard, in some ways, again, if it had a master design, could really be a beautiful entryway to or sideway to our community, since so many cars are traveling over it to come to our facilities, but also on their way to elsewhere. It used to, when we had the sycamores, which I guess exceeded their lifespan and had other issues, it was kind of a nice tree-lined boulevard. I think it's honestly been detrimental to put the asphalt for the parking across the tennis court. It's an example, I think, of bad design and ugly, and takes away again from this kind of entrance look that you could have to our kind of school and our premier facilities. So on the side here, yeah, it's become overgrown through neglect and invasives, and it just seemed to me that it's not a huge parcel of land, but it's something that could easily be either beautified or have a walking path, since we need walking paths and bike paths. This seems like a good candidate between the two major streets there. Any, I think, design you would want to take into account, once again, the input of the people living with their yards back to it.
Yeah.
But there's a good portion of the land that is public land.
Can I jump in on the walking path? So commission has discussed that intersection
Yes.
at Salem and Cedar as a challenging one for pedestrians. By putting a walking path through here, you could basically get from Salem over to a traffic light, a signal crosswalk, which I'm guessing is safer than crossing at the.
Well, there's a sidewalk in front of the tennis center, though. I mean, that's about it.
From the Salem side.
Okay.
So you're coming down Salem,
Yeah,
rather than cross Cedar Boulevard and paint with these crosswalk signs, traverse the slope.
What do we call the trails that aren't actual trails? They're just
Deer Trail.
they're wish trails, well, yeah, whatever they are. People are gonna cross here, right, regardless.
Oh, this is
Right.
true, but if you don't want to,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to a trail there. I honestly, because I live just over the hill from here, I'm over here all the time, right? And so this one I stare at regularly, and I'm in this intersection regularly. And frankly, when we were having the Salem Cedar intersection discussion, one of the things that kept coming to my mind is that this whole corridor is part of the park. And part of this is a visual experience of you're going to slow traffic down by getting people to recognize that they're now entering a park space. How do you do that? That's not necessarily just about the road surface itself. That's part of it. But the other part of it is, how do you bring the park into that other side of the road? And again, for me, that's where I'm not a designer. So I kind of go, huh, yeah, there's something there, but I don't know what. But for me, putting a park sign what we're looking at right here, that says, welcome to Main Park, even though it's not on the park side, makes sense to me. Because again, I'm trying to create that visual experience to slow people down and to create that space. But I think to the broader discussion, which is a really valid one, what do you do with that whole hillside? Whether it's just clearing it, planting it, what's the planting that they, the comp plan they proposed, it's a Miyawaki forest, yeah. Whether it's, you do a Miyawaki forest, you know,
I think, what I see here, I see a stand of eastern white pines in the center, up on top of the ridge, a few oak trees. I see an increasing slope, but as you first get to it there by the stop sign, or just beyond the stop sign, it's not that steep. So you could have a mixture of mowed area, meadow, groves of trees. Miyawaki forest, I think it's fantastic if we're, living in a deer-free environment, but I just think it's hard to manage that. But a few different groves of trees with mowed area as well as some meadow planting, depending on where the slope makes mowing not practical.
But I think you need someone you really need to hire a landscape designer who has also the kind of overall park design component as well. Again, if you're, there's kind of two ways to go about it. One is to restore this area. And again, there's elements, there could be a path, could not be a path, but you could, have someone design native plants here and trees, shrubs, to make it more of what Commissioner Flynn's talking about, a gateway. But then, there could be a larger design for all of Cedar Boulevard, because again, it is kind of the park gateway. So just like if you go through Fox Chapel, there's roads there that you feel like you're in a park, but they're also main throughways for Fox Chapel. And there's other areas in other urban communities, like even DC has its Rock Creek Parkway and George Washington Parkway, which is a national park. But and this is not of that caliber, but it at least could be aesthetically pleasing and fit part of a whole. And someone, even just like Kelly Agrodnik, she can do this kind of stuff. But
You want to put trees down the center of the road.
yeah, I mean, you need somebody who knows what's being done in other areas and who has that imagination of what the possibilities are.
I think the right landscaping design could have an impact on traffic speed.
oh, most definitely,
Just
no doubt.
So what would the commissioners recommend as baby steps, first steps on getting something done here? Because it's been like this for a long time.
Well, I'm feeling guilty that I didn't ask why, if this was going to be included in the parks master plan or in the main park plan. I should have, and I just didn't. It didn't even.
doesn't register as part of the park.
Right.
I didn't realize we
Unless you look at the
like our
map.
backyards, I guess.
Yeah, in fact, you'd be surprised how much of that property is municipal. There's
It's a big chunk.
the back of Academy, the property lines are not very far beyond the end of their driveways.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of, that if we're asking them to go back to the drawing board, which we did, it should probably include something for that. Just off the top of my head, it would be tough to do walkways there, or, because we'd have to level that out. And it would probably require a wall or a step wall along part of it. The bike trails would be tough because it would be a bike lane to nowhere. Because at the point where we get further down, there's no connecting shoulder, and then we get up further, there's no room to add anything without taking property away from residents, which we could do, but that would be tough.
It's really steep too, right off of the parking area that was created. I mean, it's basically a 2-to-1 slope right there, so.
We have to level
It's
off
not
the
manageable,
wall.
yeah. Well, either that or have something that you don't have to maintain, some sort of vegetation that's a ground cover basically that
Yeah.
is maintenance free, and you basically plant it and forget about it, some kind of fescues or something like that.
But clearing and replanting, probably gonna be the easiest and most affordable way to tackle that area.
Which goes back to the invasives discussion, right? Just like, well, okay, what does it take to, go back to, an active management plan that is essentially, clear the invasives and and then proactively manage natives.
And we've done that. We did it in Twin Hills. I mean, we basically just ground everything up. We did what, 5, 6 acres over there, something like that. But you have to decide what you want it to look like afterwards.
Right.
You know,
3
that's-
acres.
Wildflowers.
Whatever. Those are easy to plant.
Yeah, they are.
I think it's a combo. I think it's trees, wildflowers, some grass.
There's already some mature trees through there. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
there's
few
a-
other trees and
Um,
some maple.
But, I mean, clearing the brush off would tell us what we got. Is there any exposed rock? Is there any water? Is like that type of first step, just to see what's there, without creating an erosion problem.
But I think to answer your question or your larger question, what do we need to do to move something like that forward? This is the first Parks Board meeting I've ever attended, so I don't, you may have this, you may not, but you know, other boards that have put together kind of priority projects that have said, hey, this is a priority for us. You know, like the Parks Master Plan's coming together, you've made comments on that, and we'll see where all that lands. And, you know, obviously you've got some projects here that are top of mind and some that are kind of still continuing. I think at some point, the commission's not gonna make any big expenditures because we tend to push stuff to budget time. So anything over, I don't know, maybe
4 or 5 grand, something.
4 or
like
5 grand, we push to have a more holistic conversation in the scope of the entire budget, so that we're not doing, you know, 30 pet projects of $4,000. Next thing you know, you get to the end of the year and you're like, oh, we have a $750,000 deficit and we need to raise taxes. So like we've avoided doing that, which I think has been good. So when we get to like May, June, and the boards are coming to us with, these are our top 3 priorities, that helps us kind of focus the money on the projects that the boards really care about.
But in the interim, I will raise with Ian, just ask him, but how, you know, would this be a huge lift for to change the scope? Or would this fall in scope? I suspect they'll say, no, that's out of scope, but we can ask.
It would have an impact. I'll just throw this out there, too. It would have an impact on those property owners up on Academy. So, you know, so it would definitely have to be something where some notification is sent out and some communication with them to make sure that they know what is in the works or is being planned before it impacts. So they have swing sets back there, trampolines for their kids, all that kind of stuff, you know? And there's a buffer. Now that creates a natural buffer. Even though it's invasives, it still creates a buffer between those homes, their backyard, and the busyness of the tennis center and those areas. So we want to make sure that they know what's going on before we do it. Because clearing that really wouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, you know, we could either get a contractor or an attachment for our skid steer and go up in there and do brush clearing, but at the end of the day, you need to know what you're gonna put back in there because you can clear it and then we'd have to be back a few years later doing it again. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I honestly, let's see what Patrick with the main park plan
As a first
says.
step,
Yeah, cause if they'll include it because they're working on it all anyway, it's just
They're there.
3 acres, yeah. That would be nice to have at least something that we can all at least, you know, look at and go, interesting idea.
It ties into Greenhurst too, you know, those green areas there. I mean, it kind of ties into that, so.
Yeah.
They moved the disc golf course.
Oh, is it there?
We'll play cross cedar.
Par 3 golf, par 3 did golf.
All right. That's, I'm gonna bow out. I need to go get prettied up here. Thank you, guys.
You know, but Andrew.
Rafferton Restoration and Playground. Good. Shall we close this one?
Yeah, I was telling Phil before the meeting that I went over and visited it for the first time in many, many years, this past weekend. I was very impressed with the work that had been done. Invasives in the municipal code. I haven't heard anything from Ian. I think we can close it because I don't think we have anything else to offer.
Just for your reference, Commissioner Grella, this was work with Ian. Tom did the legwork to recommend changes to the municipal code so that we are not just approving of invasives, but sort of endorsing planting invasives in the sourdough.
Okay.
Ian said he would take care of it in the.
Updates of the code after the comp plan.
And
When he
basically,
introduces the updates for the comp, the saldo and the code, the municipal code. No, not for that, just not the overall, there's gonna be some changes. The way Ian explained it when he attended one of the previous meetings here, was that those updates will be incorporated into one comprehensive change of the municipal code. So it's mainly, I would say just text changes, right?
yeah, it's we get a little. Well, what we advised is simply refer to the DCNR
There,
list.
right. So you take the state
So there's
and
nothing to.
reference to that.
Honestly, we just refer to that, say don't plant it.
Okay, gotcha, okay. So rather than call out our,
Yes.
Right.
okay.
And then it's updated if the state's is updated automatically by default.
Doesn't provide any help for anybody looking for what to plant, but.
No,
Well, no,
it tells you what you can't.
That's the
put.
thing, we're not telling
Yeah.
you what to, we're just what you shouldn't.
Right.
Comp plan, still open for a comment. Does anyone, Peter, Richard, Danya, you all feel like we need to do anything more collectively as a board, or at this point say individual comments to the comp plan, just go up for it as a citizen?
You know, once the comment closing period, because I slept through the fact that it had been reissued. The graph.
Don't know. Do you recall when the comp plan comment period closes, or when the vote is, I guess?
We didn't have a hard timeline for comments. It was like, get them in as soon as you can. We pushed vote back until,
The next.
I think, the
two
second
meetings.
meeting.
Second meeting in January, yeah.
Yeah, so whatever the last,
Fourth Tuesday.
fourth Tuesday in January will
Right.
be a likely vote on that.
Well, unless we had a special Parks Advisory Board meeting, which I'm not calling for, it'd probably be easiest just to submit on our own.
Okay.
And we can reference what the PAB had recommended. That over whenever it was.
So Peter, or Richard, if you have any further comments to the comp plan, please go for it independently.
Roger that.
Right, might as well cross this one off too. Mount Lebanon School District invasives management, so the hillside above the south parking lot. Is a
Okay, so you guys.
thank you, Rudy,
You're welcome.
pretty thick with knotweed. Affects the park. And the question was whether anyone or rather, anyone, if this board wants to address the school district in regard to that. We mentioned it to Mindy. She talked about going to a public meeting. I thought maybe, simply a letter from the township saying you have a knotweed problem on your property. Our property right next door is negatively affected by it.
Yeah.
We can help you.
I'm the commission liaison to the school board, so I can have that conversation with the new school board liaison to the commission, who has not been identified yet, but we can start there and I'll report back.
Okay. And
But
we're
I
happy to
think-
provide.
Just to add that you also got the issue at Markham where the source of knotweed that keeps coming into Bird Park is from Markham.
Can someone send me just like a quick email summary of the issues and I'll bring them up and ask the school board the best way to address it? If need be, I can just go to a school board meeting and try to get it done behind the scenes faster than going to a school board meeting and, all that jazz.
Yes. Thanks, Richard. I forgot that one. Okay, so now back to park visits. We've talked about Main Park with Tennis Center, so cross that off. Thank you, Craig, Commissioner Grow. Twin Hills. Tanya.
I wasn't able to make it, like, for you to everything else, the
Okay.
Twin Hills.
Your next, you'll be on the next one. Danya, or, I'm sorry, Peter or Richard, any comments about Twin Hills?
I think I mentioned I wasn't able to get to any, I was planning to go this weekend, but I was sick and still am, so.
And-
um,
And I basically haven't been in Mount Lebanon since mid-October, so I was in a project in Cleveland and got home, and literally now I'm in Arizona, so. I apologize, I just didn't have any time or ability to get to the parks.
Okay. I was there, actually, Tom and I were there not too long ago. Comments. That one stream has a lot of potential. It's continuously flowing and nice.
Yeah, the stream is a huge asset there. I've never seen it dry, even like in August and September. There's a lot of trash in the, one of the branches up by the apartment complex, but that's probably just a cleanup day or two. I mean, invasives are the key things, and I think the biggest problems with Twin Hills, Jim and the Oikos report will express more professionally and elegantly than anything I could say this evening. There are a lot of areas in the 2016-ish project area where it was cleared and replanted that wineberry and others invasives have repopulated, and it's just, as we said time and time again, we need a comprehensive plan and strategy to have, ongoing maintenance. Because the volunteer efforts of the Conservancy and others are just not, they're just not sufficient to give it the attention it needs.
I think I agree. I would say just that.
It's a very, well, I don't have empirical data. It'd be interesting to know. But it's very heavily used by the neighborhood. Mostly with dog walkers, but
Church Place,
That I've been to.
Danya.
So there's, the mulch around the tree near the parking lot, it needs some mulch, and there's a lot of erosion right where the tree is. I have a feeling that would affect the tree, and then there was a broken branch on the tree near the the vegetable plot. The vegetable plot in itself looked really good with late season veggies growing. Some trash in the pavilion looked like, and also in the park area, it looked like kids were there and they just forgot their bag and stuff. So, but other than that, it's a really nice park.
I was over there on this past Friday, and you're more observant than I am. I noticed the broken branch, but I thought, overall, it looked in pretty good shape. But Bill, I think you said that they just had redone we're about to do that.
This winter, we're gonna rip out all the wood fiber surface. This one's hard for us to maintain, just in the fact that we almost have to restore the park once we go in it to add wood chips. It's only accessible like by dump truck. We do more damage to keep up on it sometimes than keeping up on it, if that makes any sense. But the fall zone in there this winter, our guys are gonna get in there. We're gonna hog out all the wood fiber material, prep a stone base, and that play surface, kind of hitting with the Main Park master plan of improved safety surfaces throughout. That one's gonna get the same synthetic surface that Main Park got. We're gonna add a couple ground play elements in there. There's not, it's hard with playground equipment, you need a use zone that's X amount of feet past each actual point you can touch. This park's hard to get anything in. So adding those ground play elements, it will make it more inclusive, number one, which is a great add for any park when we can do it. But two, once that product goes in there, aside from maintenance visits to stop and look at it, it has a 15-year warranty life period. It's done very well at Main Park this past year. So we're gonna go with that same theme. We'll probably end up addressing the kind of bench that's hidden off to the back. The split rail will get replaced with our new standard that we've been using around Bird Park. We're gonna try to take a holistic look at this park in terms of biting off master plan recommendations for one of the smaller neighborhood ones.
It's great.
The wood chips look, I mean, I was impressed with the condition they were in, so.
Compared to the other parks.
Pretty good. Yeah, I noticed that somebody left like giant not checkers, dominoes on the table
Mhm.
and the bag of stuff. I was wondering, maybe neighborhood folks are just leaving it there as sort of a communal.
It could be.
Communal dominoes is kind of a cool idea.
So the branch on the tree by the wedge plot, it's like at the farther end, there's a branch that's broken and hanging off. And then there's another tree right across next to the playground. That's where a lot of the erosion is happening. It's like completely stripped off.
There's some goofy
So
property
I think
lines there as
I
well.
took pictures. I just didn't, I was not organized enough to put them
Oh, you're
into.
good.
There's a big pile of wood chips up, by behind the funeral home or church, or whatever parking lot. And there's sort of a path that goes up by the neighbor's backyard, and I was baffled as to where the property line was, or.
That one's a little strange. We can look it up, but this North Meadowcroft is sort of like a unspoken lease thing where I think we pay the church $1 or something like that, so I believe it is church property. But I don't think it goes much farther than the edge of that vegetable garden. If there's anything beyond that, that's not anything we would start getting into.
I haven't been up there in years and years. I was favorably impressed.
Mhm.
Because there is some knotweed beyond that, up in that sort of scrubby area there, but
I was looking for that. I didn't see, because you mentioned on one of the meetings, man, maybe somebody took it out recently.
somebody may have, but I know it wasn't part of any of our programs recently.
Moving on, Meadowcroft, I don't have any pictures. We know pickleball is busy over there.
Even when school is on, the kids have been like playing hard on the pickleball courts more than on the actual playground.
Oh,
Okay, like,
Yeah, so
playing
it's
pickleball or just playing,
just playing. They
It's a nice
just,
surface to play on.
yeah, so it was a lot of kids just in that, so that was nice to see.
I was there over the weekend and I noticed that the new lights, the pickleball court and the old lighting on the basketball court, which I guess is scheduled to be replaced at some point, but the basketball court isn't perfect, but it looked reasonably playable.
Yeah, I mean, it's still usable.
Yeah, it's certainly usable.
We'll probably end up seeing new bank boards and hoops on those through operating funds this year. It's not a hard lift. And it's something that probably could stay for the future. They'll end up most likely milling around, unless we really find something wrong with the gooseneck hoops, but if we can make an improvement now, even though funding isn't there for the whole kabam, I think that'd be pretty well received. It almost looks off when you look at one side of it, the park, and then you look over the other, like, right, same park. So we'll do what we can through operating what makes sense, and is not forgotten when a big project comes.
I think the last time I was there, and maybe they're gone since then, but those those clipped guy lines are still on the big maple trees between
They're not off
No,
last time here? Okay.
last time I was there,
That's an easy.
between the tennis, I was gonna do it myself, but then I thought, maybe someone would think I'm stealing, so. Any other comments about Meadowcroft? Okay. Golf course and community gardens. I went there this weekend, so I have a few pictures. Peter, any comments about the community gardens?
I was muted, but I laughed. Well, yeah, actually, they took better care of the peripheral this year. The hillside is, it's always covered in trash that overflows from the dumpsters that are right there. I'd suggested that they put a barrier, but they didn't. I think they thought that the garbage trucks would bump it or something, but it's always covered. I mean, if you went there now, the last time I was there, there were like white bags and all over the place, and yeah, anyhow. So and I kind of was thinking on that main park discussion with the disc golf that maybe there were some unused areas of the golf course where that could be put in. But I do think probably a better idea would be McNeely. And then the fence thing, I've kind of given up on that. It's been after it for over a decade, and I think the last I talked to Dave Donnell, and he said he puts it in along with his other it's not gone in as a capital item, it goes in as an operating thing, and then it just gets crossed off every year. So, but I think the amount he put in there is way too high for what it could be. There's some rope mechanisms, which I'm gonna investigate, that I've seen used at clubs. So
Yeah.
that's about it. I do not
What I felt about the fence was the existing fence is too short and can be undermined by a groundhog, but otherwise it looked pretty well intact.
Yeah.
And for.
Yeah, but it doesn't, it's in good shape, but it doesn't do anything.
I know, I was gonna say, I think along the same lines you're thinking, even if it's just temporary for the season,
Mm-hmm.
members could strap, aluminum poles to each fence post and just run that deer netting around it.
Yeah.
So
We've done that.
some of them have, some of the plots have done that.
I've done that individually,
Individually, yeah.
and I'm saying, could we not just, I mean, how much is that gonna cost? A few $100?
Yeah, I mean, actually, in fact, that's kind of what I do with my plots. And then just one row from one neighbor's plot. But I think part of that whole issue is putting the stuff up every year and taking it down is a pretty significant chore right at the time when you're
Right.
busy, trying to get your plants in. And I think we could get a volunteer effort, though, to put in something more permanent. And again, that's what I want to investigate, but not cyclone. And I don't know, whether Dave would have, whether there'd be any restrictions on it, but I guess the other issue is that I've encountered several people who have stopped gardening because they were doing it with their elderly parent or grandmother, and they couldn't make it down to the, because they're usually at the bottom there. And I almost wondered if there could be a golf cart that could be, dedicated for people who have accessibility problems. It's a long walk down with tools and equipment to that lower end of the gardening center. I mean, the other idea, I guess Andrew has brought up was, relocating that bottom garden and or again, putting gardens in at some of the various parks. And the one at Church Place actually, I think, was just installed. It's not an official garden. It's just the community residents put it in there. Is that correct, Phil?
Yeah.
That's as far as my 9 years of being here has seen it, is it's a very fluid, free moving thing
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah. I know somebody who lives on that street and they love the park. So, and it seems that they seem to take good care of it too.
I'll reiterate the idea, Peter. I really think that's a niche that could be served by a private group, meaning it's on public property, but, create a,
I mean, even if the path is just paved, like I was walking down the entire parts of it is like sloped down. So I don't know if it's the mud. It was hard to walk because it was not level. The middle path was not level. So if we just had it leveled out and paved, like basic pavers, it would make it easier for older folks to get down to the very end.
is this within the plot?
Within the plot, I opened the gate. I don't know if
Within
it's-
the actual square of the.
Yeah, it was like plots on either side and then the center path. Initially it would start out okay, but then it started like tilting to the left, like really tilting that I found it hard to walk. Somebody with mobility issues would not be able to balance.
Phil, would it have to go through Denellen or through you and Rudy as far as just getting that hillside below the dumpster there? Just brush hogged. It's a relatively small area, but it's filled with.
Equipment wise, and who operates it over there would be through Denellen. It makes the most sense. I would think, I don't want to speak out of turn for the directors and their departments, but he has guys over there. There's ample equipment for that activity, I think. I don't know the terrain and what's buried in there. But I'm sure it's something if possible, David could at least have Jason take a look at it and see what he thinks in terms of operating machinery to improve the aesthetic of it.
And just jumping back to your point, Rob, about privatization. Honestly, I don't get me wrong. I kind of, when Mindy first brought that up, I kind of resent it in a way because I understand that there's other places that have it private, but there's also other places where the townships support them and the city supports them. And I think, this is just because this is a passive and a green recreation and it appeals to different people. I don't understand why we have to create a private foundation when other recreational groups don't need to do that in order to have facilities provided by the township. So that's
Well,
part where I'm
You
going.
do.
Honestly-
There are many. I mean, it's not just paddle or indoor tennis. There's a baseball association, a soccer association. All those entities are collecting dues and allocating resources, and they have a greater say in what happens. I don't see it that it's that much different than like indoor tennis.
Well, I take your point. And we pay 55, I think, a year. I've been told that's one of the highest in the city. But
Yeah, I'm trying to give you control of
Right.
how the money's used.
yeah, I guess I just wonder because there is turnover year to year, and I've put some things out there, and there's a few core people who are interested, but I don't know that you could get the volume to do it. Just basically, I'm trying to mobilize them for other things.
Okay.
But anyways, I don't think we should spend a lot of time on it.
I just wanted to bring up, so as you go down the path on the right side, I'm not sure if it's the homeowners who live on, there was a lot of big big plants dumped, like with roots. So there's an azalea, some grass varieties.
Dumped into the garden.
No, on the side of the path, on the right side. So I'm not sure if it was the property owners who decided to get rid of some landscaping, but it's like right by the paths, or if it was something that was on the golf course and then they took it, because it's a pile different from the compost pile. So, and it's huge, big azalea bush, some grass varieties. It's on the right side as you go down the.
I was impressed by the size of the area adjacent to the garden. So if you continue going down the slope to the left, there's a pretty big valley there that has a little stream coming through it. It's a big area. I mean, if you really needed to stick a disc golf course, you could probably fit it all right in there. And then just walking around the golf course, they also have deer damaged trees. These not that one. This is the long fairway. I don't know what hole it is now, but adjacent to Country Club Park, whatever hole ends at Country Club, they've got four trees at least that look just like this. And I'll just throw it out there again. We should be guarding every tree we plant in this town because the guards, what we have on them is literally laying next to them in a couple of cases. And like some of these trees have been hit year after year and it's just, they're brutalized. I don't see the point. So talk to the fella at the golf course. What is now number 4, old number 7? They need a new fence. It's a long dog leg left. You know, it's the hole that abuts Thornwood. They've got a 4-foot fence that's falling down the hillside, so he's like, hey, you know, we need money for our fence. That's all capital stuff. Any other comments about the golf course?
Well, big capital expense down the road is the clubhouse needs to be updated at some point. But I'm sure that'll be handled by the future board. I've also been curious, they rent out a room there to someone and I wonder if that's publicly advertised. I hope so, as opposed to, you know, yeah, just that it's treated properly and legally.
So Country Club, another nice little park. Great mature trees. Nice basketball court, play set. It all looked really good. They have a picnic table in the shade.
I was wondering how far down the hill there the public property line goes.
To the right, down.
Well, yeah, from this picture to the right. First time I was over there this weekend.
It's a pretty significant piece. There's 10 to 15 acres, I think, on that side of the golf course that goes down. You know, there'd be room like in that space if it were ever cleared for a frisbee golf. You just have to be aware, you know, the reason it hasn't been used is because of golf balls flying there.
And actually that from this perspective, looking to the left, that forest is really nice. The forest that abuts Sleepy Hollow is really nice. The other side of the golf course is not nice, is in terms of quality of trees and everything, but this is an underappreciated tract of land. I wonder how much it gets used for the deer call. I would imagine.
There was a sign up on the fence.
Any comments, Rel? Any more comments for Country Club?
Near the park entrance, I'm not sure if it was because of the leaves. It looked like there was some drainage issues and somebody had just moved mud and debris away from the storm drain, so the water could flow down. So it just looked muddy and just right near the entrance.
Say the end of leaf season, we'll do that to the
Yeah.
streets, so usually
It
when
looked
everything.
like everything had blown down, mixed with mud and with the rains and everything, but somebody, maybe one of the residents had moved it away from this, but it's still accumulated, so it's not really helping because it's gonna, with more rain, it's gonna come back.
I don't have any current pictures of Rockwood.
There's a tree that's completely, the bark is stripped out, it's the Tilia American. It's up on the top part of the Rockwood, park.
Okay,
And it's like, there's no protective covering anywhere in sight and it's completely stripped. Like the.
ripped recent, I was quietly not boasting the praises of that one because there was guards were successful over there.
Everything else is on, it's just this one tree that
Mr. Buck
didn't
like that
have,
tree.
I looked around for the protective covering thinking it might have flown off or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't around and the bark is completely, it's bare.
I was surprised that it was still happening. Cause deer got one of the peach trees in my yard in, mid-December. I thought it was supposed to be over.
It's goofy.
Other than that, the first time I've been there, probably 25 years since we were house hunting when we moved here. I was pleasantly surprised by Rockwood. It seemed like things were in pretty good shape. I missed things, but,
I mean, the old signage is gonna be replaced, right?
Yeah.
That one was,
Yeah, it'll go actually right where Rob's almost scrolling past there was our initial thought. On an angle where there was a big locust there at one point. Right here. Yeah.
was there some plan to do some kind of vegetable gardening up on the slope, the second slope up behind the bench over there? Yeah.
so yeah, there's that kind of weird plateau.
Yeah, and then it
There used
looked
to be
like
a-
somebody had tried to plant something, but
No, we ripped out all of the hedgerow along there and just did a fescue mix for now.
okay.
Until we revisit that.
It looked like some kind of other planting. I couldn't identify what the plant was, but it kind of repeated itself. So I don't know if somebody did try to plant something.
Could be runners from that, little shrubs coming back up or something too, so. Sure, we'll fight that for a little bit, that slope until we
Yeah, the tree that was stripped was right behind the hedges that were
cut
replanted.
in between the two rows there.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was behind, yeah. Almost right in front of those pine trees. Yeah. Further down. I don't know if you can
Right
see,
over that.
so that
That's the elm
tree
there. That-
over there, the protective covering was gone and it was completely stripped. Yeah. Right in front of that arrow.
Yeah. there's
Yeah.
all of that slopes.
I looked at the tag, it said Tilia Americana.
Yeah, it's a nice park.
And that maple in the corner has been ground out. We heavily seeded that corner too. There's pretty bad erosion
Yes.
right there as well. So we're gonna keep eye on that and try to establish some good turf on there, hopefully.
All right, any other comments or questions about Rockwood? Great. Well, we talked a little bit about board transition with the commissioners. I included in that email, sorry, just, just a real quick reminder. As far as expiring terms. Seems, is there one person whose term?
I think Kelly.
Kelly's? Okay. So. He'll be the one, if she wants to, I guess. Actually, no, she's on the health board. Kelly is this, box here. The rest of us are, if we choose to, reapply. Unless you've served 2 successive terms, which I think Richard falls into.
Wait, Rob, what meeting is this taken from, the screenshot? Or what is this from?
This is from Ian's presentation to us and probably commission from.
Right. So, I asked Commissioner Flynn about this,
Yeah,
and he said at least for himself, he will appoint the boards as he see fits, and that he would seek balance on the board. So, because I made a public comment on this after it was presented by Ian, basically saying it's kind of I think, a bureaucratic approach to filling the seats, because it's not really a logical approach. It's like, let's find a formula and apply it, and it doesn't really matter, what the end result is. But clearly you need balance on all of these boards, and you'd want to pick a balance of people with different expertise, just as we have within our own board. But it seems like this was just an initial plan thrown out by Ian, and that's why I raised a concern about a month ago with Commissioner Flynn, and at least from what he wrote to me, it seemed to assuage those fears.
okay.
But we
Yeah,
should seek clarification at our next meeting.
yeah, I'm gonna keep it on. I think the takeaway from Commissioner Flynn's comments tonight is what topics do we think stand to gain the most from input from the current board? Meaning, if there are any particular items where we think, having a carryover of knowledge is particularly important, let's highlight those things. I think the invasives management is one, at least, just based on what our conversation was tonight. So I'll keep it on, and maybe we can have some interim conversation about topics or the makeup of the next board, and talk about it again the next meeting. Knowing the time is basically gone, so commission meeting message, January topics and volunteers. Anybody have any burning item other than your independent comments to the comp plan? I do encourage you to read it. We focused on the Parks and Rec part, but there's a lot in there that is worth your review.
I don't have anything to go to the commission at the moment.
All right, motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Rob. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Yes. The next, if you flip over.